The late afternoon sun painted the city square in soft golden light. People moved through the streets, each wrapped up in their own world. A woman hurrying home with groceries, a man sipping coffee on a bench, a couple arguing quietly over directions. Amid the noise of traffic and voices, a sweet, rich sound floated through the air. It came from a black upright piano sitting near the fountain, its wooden surface scratched from years of use, but its voice still warm and alive. A street pianist sat there, his fingers dancing across the keys with effortless grace. The melody he played was gentle but full of energy, the kind that made strangers stop in their tracks. Some people smiled, others dropped coins into the open case by his feet. A few kids clapped in rhythm, their laughter mixing with the music. It was one of those rare moments when the world slowed down, when sound replaced noise, and everything felt peaceful. A small boy stood at the edge of the crowd. He was maybe 10 years old, wearing an oversized shirt and faded jeans. His sneakers were worn out, and one of the laces had been tied together in a knot. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched. His eyes followed every movement of the pianist's hands, the rise and fall of his fingers, the way his foot pressed on the pedal, the soft bounce of his shoulders with each note. He wasn't looking for entertainment. He was studying. People came and went, but the boy stayed. He held an old backpack tight against his chest, as if it were something precious. Sometimes he whispered to himself, quietly counting the beats or mouthing invisible notes. Every once in a while he tilted his head, listening more closely when a chord changed. He seemed completely lost in the music, as if nothing else existed. Not the noise of the cars, not the chatter of the people, not even the smell of roasted nuts coming from a food cart nearby. The pianist finished his song and lifted his hands off the keys. The crowd applauded. Some tossed a few more coins in, and the pianist nodded with a small smile of thanks. Then he reached for a bottle of water beside the piano, wiping the sweat from his forehead. That's when he noticed the boy still standing there, staring at the instrument like it was something magical. "You like the piano, kid?" the pianist asked with a friendly grin. His voice was deep, kind, but tired, the kind of voice that had spent years talking over city noise. The boy nodded quickly but didn't say anything. His eyes flickered between the man and the piano. "Ever play one before?" the pianist asked again. The boy hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "A little bit." Something in his tone made the man pause. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't shyness. It was the kind of honesty that only comes from a child who's not trying to impress anyone. Just truth. "Well," the pianist said, chuckling softly, "that's a start. You like music, huh?" The boy nodded again. "What's your favorite song?" The boy thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't know the names," he said. "I just play what I feel." The pianist raised an eyebrow. That wasn't something he expected to hear. The people around began to lose interest, slowly walking away to continue their day. But the boy didn't move. He stayed rooted to the spot, his eyes locked on the piano. It was as if his whole world existed in those black and white keys. The pianist started another tune, something lively and fast this time. His hands flew over the keys, filling the air with bright, playful sounds. The boy's eyes widened. His lips moved silently, following along, predicting the next note before it came. His body swayed slightly, feeling the rhythm. A little girl passing by with her mother tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, look, he's really good," she said, pointing to the pianist. The mother smiled, dropping $1 into the open case. But the boy didn't even notice them. He was too focused. The music seemed to flow through him, lighting up something deep inside. He stepped a little closer, then stopped himself, almost as if he didn't want to get too near to something sacred. When the song ended, the pianist leaned back again, taking another sip of water. The square was starting to quiet down. The sun had begun to sink lower, stretching long shadows across the pavement. The boy took a small step forward, then another. "Sir," he said softly, his voice barely louder than a whisper. The pianist looked up. "Yeah." The boy hesitated. His fingers tightened around the straps of his backpack. "Can I try?" he asked. For a moment, the sounds of the city seemed to fade away. The pianist blinked, unsure if he had heard right. The boy looked nervous now, as if he might run away at any second. His voice trembled a little when he repeated, "Can I try?" The pianist chuckled. "You mean the piano?" The boy nodded quickly. "Just for a minute," he said. The man looked around. A few people had stopped to watch again, sensing something interesting was about to happen. He smiled, not unkindly, but with a trace of doubt. He'd been playing here for years, and plenty of kids had asked the same thing. Usually they'd just bang on the keys and laugh. But there was something different about this boy. The way he spoke, the way he had been watching. He studied the boy's small, hopeful face. Then he looked down at the piano, then back at the crowd. Finally, he sighed and said, "All right, kid, let's see what you got." The boy's eyes widened. For a second, he didn't move, like he couldn't believe the man had said yes. Then he hurried forward, almost tripping over his own feet. He set his backpack gently on the ground beside the piano and climbed onto the small stool. His legs dangled above the pavement. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. The pianist crossed his arms, standing just behind him, curious but ready to stop him if he started pounding the keys. The crowd murmured softly, half amused, half interested. Someone took out their phone to record. The boy took a deep breath. Then he pressed a single note. It rang out softly, pure and steady. He paused, then pressed another, and another. Slowly, he began to string the sounds together. Awkwardly at first, like someone trying to remember an old song. But soon, the notes began to flow smoother. The melody started to take shape, delicate and gentle, like a quiet breeze through trees. The pianist leaned forward slightly. He recognized the sound. It wasn't random. The boy knew what he was doing. Each note had emotion behind it, not just movement. The crowd grew silent. The laughter faded. People leaned in closer. The boy's face changed as he played. His eyes softened. His lips parted slightly, and his whole body seemed to relax into the rhythm. It was like the piano wasn't just an instrument, it was his voice. Every key he touched carried something inside him. Joy, sadness, memories no one else could see. When the boy stopped, the sound hung in the air for a moment before fading away. The square was completely silent. Even the fountain's water seemed quieter. The boy looked up at the pianist nervously, as if waiting for him to laugh or tell him to stop. But the pianist didn't speak. His mouth was slightly open, eyes locked on the boy's small hands resting on the keys. Finally, he let out a slow breath and said quietly, "Kid, where did you learn that?" The boy looked down, a shy smile touching his lips. "My grandma had a little keyboard," he said. "Some of the keys didn't work, but I practiced on the ones that did." The pianist didn't answer. He just stared, then nodded slowly. The crowd began to clap. Soft at first, then louder. People cheered, smiling at the boy who had just turned a quiet evening into something unforgettable. The pianist looked around, then back at the boy, still sitting at the piano with his hands resting gently on the keys. The man reached down, put a hand on the boy's shoulder, and said, "You've got something special, kid." The boy's smile widened, but he didn't say anything. He just looked at the piano again, as if he wasn't ready to leave it yet. As the sun slipped lower, painting the city in a deeper shade of gold, the pianist motioned for him to play again. The boy's eyes sparkled, and as his fingers touched the keys once more, the street filled with music, a sound that would stay with everyone there long after they'd gone home. The sound of applause slowly faded, leaving behind a hush that hung over the square. The pianist stood still, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the piano. He had played here nearly every day for years, and he had seen many faces come and go. But nothing like this. The boy still sat on the stool, his hands resting quietly on his lap, his eyes fixed on the keys, as if he were afraid the music might disappear if he looked away. The pianist finally found his voice. "That was something," he said, his tone gentle but uncertain. "What did you just play?" The boy looked up, startled by the question. "I don't know," he said softly. I just played what I felt. The pianist nodded slowly, trying to make sense of it. The kid's answer wasn't what he expected. Most kids bragged or joked, but this one spoke as if the piano was part of him. The man looked down at the worn keys. His own hands had shaped thousands of notes on this instrument, but the sound the boy made was different. It carried something raw and honest. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, smiling at the boy. You're amazing, she said, dropping a few coins into the piano case. A few others followed, tossing in bills and coins. The boy's eyes widened. He looked like he wanted to say thank you but didn't know how. He just gave a small nod and slid off the stool. Thank you, sir, he whispered to the pianist. The man tilted his head. For what? For letting me try. Those simple words hit him harder than he expected. He cleared his throat. You've got a gift, kid, he said. You really do. The boy smiled shyly, picked up his backpack, and started to step back into the crowd. But the pianist stopped him. Wait. The boy froze, turning around slowly. Where did you say you learned to play? The pianist asked again. My grandma, the boy said. She used to play old songs for me. She had a little keyboard at home, but some of the keys didn't work. So I learned to make music with the ones that still did. The pianist looked at him quietly. The boy's tone was soft, but there was no sadness in it, just a kind of humble pride. He didn't talk like he was missing something. He talked like he had made the best out of what he had. That explains it, the man murmured. Explains what? The boy asked. You don't play with your head, the pianist said. You play with your heart. Most people forget that. The boy tilted his head slightly, not sure what to say. He just smiled, clutching the straps of his backpack. The crowd started to break apart as the evening breeze picked up. The air smelled faintly of rain and roasted corn from a nearby stall. The pianist sat down again, brushing his fingers over the keys, but for the first time in a long time he didn't feel like playing. His thoughts were somewhere else, on that boy and the sound that had just filled the square. He stared at his own hands for a moment. They were strong, practiced, but suddenly felt heavy. He had spent years learning theory, technique, and rhythm. Yet that little boy, with his broken keyboard and small hands, had just played something that felt alive. As the boy started to walk away, the pianist called out again, Hey kid! The boy turned around. You ever think about learning for Real? Like taking lessons? The boy hesitated. I'd love to, he said softly. But lessons cost money. The man nodded slowly. He understood that too well. He had grown up with the same problem, wanting something so badly but never being able to afford it. For a second, he saw a reflection of his younger self standing in front of him. Well, the pianist said with a small smile, if you ever come by here again, I'll let you play. Deal? The boy's face lit up instantly. Really? Really? The man said. But only if you promise one thing. What's that? Keep practicing, even if the keys don't work. The boy nodded eagerly. I promise. The pianist grinned. All right then. He reached down and pressed a few notes. You want to play one more before you go? The boy looked around nervously. The crowd had thinned, and only a few people were still nearby. He bit his lip, thinking. Then he stepped forward again and climbed back onto the stool. Okay, he said quietly. This time he didn't hesitate. His fingers moved faster, the melody fuller. The notes carried a quiet kind of joy, not loud or fancy, just warm. The pianist stood beside him, listening closely. The tune sounded like it came from somewhere deep, from a place words couldn't reach. When he finished, the boy gave a small smile. That's one Grandma used to hum, he said softly. The pianist nodded, his eyes thoughtful. She must have been a good teacher. She was, the boy said simply. The man didn't ask more. He just watched the boy pick up his backpack again and wave before disappearing into the street. The square returned to its usual rhythm. Cars passing, people talking, the fountain splashing. But something about it felt different now. The pianist sat for a long time, staring at the piano. His fingers brushed the keys, but he didn't play. He was really thinking about how music could live inside someone even when they had nothing. Later that evening, when he finally began to play again, the notes that came out were slower, deeper, more emotional. They carried a new kind of softness that hadn't been there before. The few people who stopped to listen noticed it too. It was as if the boy's song had found a home inside him. Days passed. The pianist returned to the same spot, same time, every day. But he kept glancing at the corner of the square, half expecting to see the boy again. Sometimes he did, just for a moment, standing quietly at a distance, listening. Other times he was gone completely, like a passing shadow. One afternoon, when the sun was high and the air felt heavy with heat, the pianist looked up and saw him again. The boy was standing across the street, holding that same old backpack, eyes locked on the piano. The man waved. "Hey, you keeping your promise?" he called out. The boy nodded shyly and started to walk over. When he reached the piano, the man smiled. "You still remember what you played last time?" The boy grinned. "I made something new." The pianist's eyebrows lifted. "Oh yeah? Let's hear it." Without another word, the boy sat down and began to play. The tune started soft, uncertain at first, then grew more confident. It wasn't perfect, but it had something even better. Feeling. Every note seemed to carry a story. The people walking by started to slow down again, drawn by the sound. The pianist stood beside him, not playing this time, just watching. His chest felt tight, like he was witnessing something rare. The boy's face showed pure focus, but behind it was something else. Gratitude, peace, maybe even joy. When the song ended, the boy looked up, breathing a little heavier. "Did I do okay?" he asked quietly. The pianist smiled. "You did more than okay, kid. You made them stop and listen." The boy looked around, surprised to see a small crowd had gathered again. People clapped, smiled, and even cheered softly. The pianist put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "That's music," he said quietly. "It's not about being perfect. It's about making people feel something." The boy nodded, his smile shy but bright. "That's what Grandma said too." The man laughed softly. Then she was right. As the sun began to sink, the boy stood up, waved again, and walked away with his backpack bouncing against his shoulder. The pianist watched until he disappeared around the corner. When he turned back to the piano, he touched the keys once more and whispered to himself, "Maybe I just met a real musician." That night, when he packed up his piano and wheeled it away, he kept thinking about the boy, his small hands, his broken keyboard, and that simple question, "Can I try?" He didn't know why it mattered so much, but deep down, he felt something had changed. Not just in the boy's life, but in his own. The morning after their second meeting, the city woke up slowly. The air smelled faintly of rain from the night before, and puddles still shimmered between the cobblestones. The pianist arrived early, pushing his old upright piano across the square. He had done this for years, yet today felt different. He kept glancing toward the corner where the boy usually stood. He set up his stool, opened the piano lid, and began to play a soft warm-up tune. His fingers moved smoothly, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't just waiting for tips today. He was waiting for that small face to appear in the crowd again. The boy had done something to him, stirred up feelings he hadn't realized were missing. For the first time in a long while, the pianist felt like music meant more than sound. It meant connection. As the morning light grew brighter, people began filling the square. Workers rushing by, a few tourists snapping photos, street vendors calling out for attention. The pianist kept playing, switching between calm and lively pieces, trying to catch the rhythm of the day. Still, his eyes wandered toward that same corner every few minutes. Just when he started to think the boy might not come, he saw him. The small figure appeared from between two parked cars, the same backpack hanging off one shoulder. The boy's face lit up the moment he saw the piano. He ran across the street, carefully avoiding puddles, his shoes splashing as he went. "You came back," the pianist said with a grin. The boy nodded, a little out of breath. "You said I could play again. And I meant it," the man said, moving aside on the stool. "Let's hear what you've been practicing." The boy climbed up, a little taller this time, as if confidence had added an inch or two overnight. He took a deep breath before touching the keys. His fingers hesitated for a second, then began to move, slow, uncertain, but deliberate. The first notes were soft, scattered like raindrops. Then, gradually, a melody began to form. It wasn't a song the pianist knew, but it had shape and rhythm. Each note felt like it had been pulled from somewhere deep inside the boy. It was careful but alive, fragile but full of emotion. People started to slow down. A woman pushing a stroller stopped nearby. Two college students leaned on a railing, whispering to each other. A man holding a cup of coffee froze mid-sip. The music was simple, but it had something rare: truth. The pianist crossed his arms, watching closely. The boy's technique wasn't polished, but his feeling was real. His shoulders moved gently with the rhythm, his eyes half closed, lost in the sound. Every time a note slightly missed, he corrected it, not with frustration, but with patience, like he was talking to the piano, not fighting it. Then something magical happened. The melody changed, grew richer, more confident. The boy's small hands began to find patterns, weaving one tune into another. His fingers pressed firmly now, the rhythm steady and flowing. It was no longer the sound of a child guessing. It was the sound of someone remembering. The pianist leaned forward. He could tell the boy wasn't copying a song. He was creating one. When the last note faded, the square was silent. Not even the pigeons cooed. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Another joined, and another. Within seconds, the small crowd erupted into applause. The boy turned, startled, his cheeks turning red. He hadn't noticed anyone watching. He looked down, shyly brushing his fingers across the keys again, as if unsure what to do. The pianist placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did it again," he said softly. "You made them stop." The boy smiled shyly. "It's not perfect," he whispered. "Perfection doesn't matter," the pianist said. "What matters is that you made people feel something. That's the real music." The boy looked at him, his expression thoughtful, as if those words meant more than any praise. "That's what my grandma used to say," he murmured. The pianist smiled. "She sounds like a wise woman. She used to hum songs when I was little," the boy said. "When she got tired, she told me to keep the music going so the house wouldn't feel quiet." The pianist looked at him quietly, his heart tightening a little. "And you did," he said. The boy nodded. "I tried." They sat there for a moment, both silent, listening to the city around them. The boy's eyes followed a bird flying above the rooftops, then turned back to the piano. "Can I try another one?" he asked eagerly. "Go ahead," the man said, smiling. This time, the boy played something livelier, a rhythm that made people tap their feet without realizing. His small body swayed with the tempo, his fingers flying faster than before. The pianist found himself smiling widely, even laughing quietly when the boy hit a strong note with confidence. When the song ended, the crowd clapped again, louder this time. The boy beamed. The pianist reached into his case, took out a folded handkerchief and handed it to him. "For the sweat," he said jokingly. The boy laughed, wiping his hands. "You ever think about playing on a stage?" the man asked. The boy shrugged. "I don't know how." "You just did," the pianist said with a grin. "This is your stage right here." The boy looked around at the people smiling and clapping. His grin widened, showing a missing front tooth. For the first time he looked proud. Not shy, not nervous, just happy. A little girl from the crowd stepped forward and dropped a few coins into the piano case. "You play so good," she said with a giggle. The boy blushed. "Thank you." The pianist watched the moment quietly. Something about it filled him with warmth. He realized how long it had been since he had felt true joy from playing music. Not for money, not for praise, but just for the feeling itself. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, the boy prepared to leave. He picked up his backpack but hesitated. "Can I come again tomorrow?" he asked softly. The pianist nodded. "Anytime, kid. The piano's waiting for you." The boy smiled wide. "I'll practice tonight," he promised. "I bet you will," the pianist said with a laugh. As the boy ran off, weaving through the crowd, the man sat down again. He placed his hands on the keys but didn't play right away. He just stared at them, listening to the echoes of the boy's melody still floating in his mind. Then, slowly, he began to play it, trying to remember each note, each small rhythm. He played softly, almost reverently, as if tracing the outline of a memory. People passing by might have thought he was just another street performer finishing his day. But to the pianist, the music felt new again, alive, full of meaning. He smiled to himself, whispering under his breath, "You've got something special, kid." And somewhere, not too far away, a little boy with a worn backpack was probably tapping on a broken keyboard, replaying the same melody over and over, dreaming of the piano that waited for him in the square. The next afternoon came with a soft breeze moving through the square. The sun shone brighter than usual, and the sound of chatter echoed from nearby cafes. The pianist was already in his usual spot, setting up his piano and dusting off the keys. He looked calm, but inside, he felt a quiet kind of excitement. He was waiting for the boy again. Over the past few days, their short meetings had become something special. The boy didn't talk much, but every note he played seemed to say what words couldn't. The pianist had been performing for years, yet this small child had reminded him what real music felt like, pure and full of heart. As he began playing his first song of the day, people started to gather. The city square came alive with the usual rhythm of footsteps, voices, and laughter. Still, the pianist kept glancing around. And then, like clockwork, he saw the boy running toward him, backpack bouncing against his shoulder, eyes bright with excitement. "You made it," the pianist said with a smile. "I told you I'd come back," the boy replied, breathing hard but smiling wide. "Been practicing?" The boy nodded proudly. "Every night. Grandma's old keyboard still works, kind of." The pianist laughed softly. "That's good enough. You ready to play?" The boy didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward, set down his backpack, and climbed onto the stool. The pianist moved aside, letting him take his place. The moment the boy's fingers touched the keys, the square grew quieter. It wasn't planned, but people could sense when something worth listening to was about to happen. The first few notes drifted softly through the air, and conversations faded. The melody the boy played was new, not something anyone had heard before, not even the pianist. It was tender, slow, and full of feeling. Each note seemed to carry a piece of a story. It rose and fell like a heartbeat. The crowd grew, people drawn in by the sound. A woman holding a shopping bag stopped mid-step. A young couple turned from their conversation. Even a man talking loudly on his phone lowered it and listened. The pianist stood beside the boy, arms crossed, his expression still. But inside he was deeply moved. The boy wasn't playing with technique or showing off skill. He was playing with emotion. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was sharing something personal. When the melody shifted into a soft high tone, the pianist felt something tighten in his chest. The sound was so familiar, yet so new. He realized it wasn't just music. It was memory. Somehow, this boy was turning his own emotions into sound, letting the piano speak for him. The boy closed his eyes as he played, completely lost in the rhythm. His small hands moved smoothly, pressing the keys with both strength and gentleness. Every so often, his lips moved, whispering words no one could hear. When the last note came, it hung in the air for a long, beautiful moment before fading into silence. The crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite kind people gave street performers. It was genuine, emotional, full of admiration. Some people even shouted, "Bravo!" The boy blinked in surprise. He looked around as if he hadn't realized so many people were watching. His cheeks turned red and he smiled shyly. The pianist stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it again," he said softly. The boy looked up at him. "Did you like it?" The man laughed quietly. "Like it? Kid, you just made the whole city stop to listen." The boy smiled, his eyes shining. "It's a song Grandma used to hum," he said. "She said music could make people feel what words couldn't." The pianist nodded slowly, feeling a lump in his throat. She was right, he said. He crouched down slightly, meeting the boy's eyes. Do you know what's special about what you just did? The boy shook his head. You didn't just play music, the pianist said. You told a story, your story, without saying a single word. That's something even most grown musicians forget how to do. The boy looked thoughtful for a moment, then smiled softly. Grandma used to say music is like talking to the sky, he said. It listens even when nobody else does. The pianist's chest tightened again. He looked away for a second, swallowing hard. He didn't know why, but those words hit him deeply. Maybe because he had spent years playing for crowds but had forgotten why he started playing in the first place. He stood up, clapping his hands together lightly. All right, young man, he said. How about we make a deal? The boy tilted his head. What kind of deal? Every time you come here, we play together, the pianist said. You take one half, I take the other. The boy's eyes widened. Really? You want to play with me? Of course, the man said with a grin. You've got more soul in your fingers than most people have in their whole body. I'd be lucky to share a piano with you. The boy laughed, shaking his head shyly. I don't know if I can keep up with you. You don't have to, the pianist replied. Music isn't a race. It's a conversation. The boy looked at him curiously. A conversation? Yeah, the man said. When I play, I say something. Then you answer. We listen to each other through the notes. The boy's eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement. Can we try now? The pianist smiled. Let's do it. He sat beside the boy, their shoulders nearly touching. The man started with a few soft chords, a steady rhythm, calm and deep. Then he nodded at the boy. The boy responded, his fingers adding gentle notes that danced around the man's melody. The sound that came from the piano was magical. It wasn't rehearsed, but it blended perfectly. Their notes spoke to each other, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes playful and bright. The boy would follow the pianist's tune for a while, then surprise him with his own twist. The man smiled with every unexpected change. People gathered closer. Phones came out to record. A little girl on her father's shoulders clapped to the beat. For those few minutes, the square felt like a concert hall. But neither of them played for the crowd. They played for the music, for the feeling of being completely alive in that moment. When the song ended, the crowd burst into applause again, louder than before. Some even stood on benches to see better. The boy laughed, a sound full of joy and disbelief. The pianist looked at him and said quietly, That, right there, is what music is about. The boy looked down at his hands, then back at the piano. I want to keep playing forever, he said softly. The pianist smiled warmly. Then don't ever stop. As the crowd began to leave, the pianist and the boy sat there in silence for a while, just watching the sunlight reflect off the fountain. The boy traced his fingers along the piano keys without pressing them, as if memorizing the feel of each one. The pianist finally said, I've played in big halls before, real ones with lights and an audience. But this right here, this means more. The boy turned to him. Why? Because it's real, the man said simply. No stage, no pressure, no fancy crowd. Just music, straight from the heart. The boy nodded slowly. Grandma said music only works when it comes from the heart. The pianist smiled. She must have been a great lady. She was, the boy whispered. But she doesn't play anymore. The man didn't ask why. He could tell there was more behind those words, but he didn't want to push. Instead, he placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Then maybe you're playing for her now. The boy looked at him, eyes shining again. Maybe I am, he said quietly. The pianist smiled, a little sadly. Then keep doing it. Make her proud. The boy nodded, his expression serious for the first time that day. I will. As the sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the square, the pianist started to play one last song. A calm, beautiful piece that seemed to float in the air. The boy sat beside him, quietly humming along. They didn't speak again after that. They didn't need to. The piano said everything for them. And by the time the final note faded, the square was filled with a kind of silence that felt sacred. the kind that only comes after something truly beautiful has been shared. The next morning, the city was quieter than usual. The air was cool, and the sky was still a soft gray when the pianist arrived at the square. He was earlier than normal, but he didn't mind. Ever since the boy had started showing up, the old square had begun to feel different. There was life in it again. He uncovered his piano, brushing away the thin layer of dust that had gathered overnight. A few pigeons pecked at crumbs near the fountain, and somewhere, a street vendor was setting up his cart, the smell of coffee drifting through the air. The pianist smiled to himself, thinking of the boy. There was something special about him. Not just his music, but his spirit. Every time the boy played, it was like the world paused to listen. He looked at the time. The boy was usually late by a few minutes, but he always came running, out of breath and full of excitement. Today, though, 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still no sign of him. The pianist frowned. He played a few quiet notes while waiting, glancing at the street every few seconds. The morning crowd started to move through the square, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. Just when the pianist began to worry, a sleek black car pulled up across the street. It was the kind of car you didn't see in this part of town very often. Polished, expensive, with tinted windows that reflected the morning sun. From the car stepped a man in a suit. He was tall, sharp-looking, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone used to being in charge. People turned to look as he crossed the street toward the piano. The pianist paused mid-song and looked up. "Good morning," the man said, his tone polite but firm. "Morning," the pianist replied, uncertain. "Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly. "Actually, I think you already have. You don't know me, but I've been trying to find you." "Find me?" The pianist looked puzzled. The man nodded. "I saw a video of you and a young boy playing together. It went viral online last night. Someone recorded your performance in this very square." The pianist blinked in surprise. "A video?" "Yes," the man said, taking out his phone and showing the screen. "It's been everywhere. Millions of views already. People are calling it the street corner miracle." The pianist leaned closer. There it was, him and the boy side by side playing the duet. He could see the boy's small hands dancing over the keys, the crowd surrounding them, faces full of wonder. The comments below the video were filled with emotion. "This made me cry. Pure soul. Who are these two?" The pianist looked up, stunned. "I didn't even know someone was filming. People rarely do when something real happens," the man said softly. The pianist smiled a little. "That boy, he's the real reason it's beautiful." The man's expression grew thoughtful. "That's exactly why I'm here. I run a music foundation. We support young talent. I want to meet him." The pianist straightened, hope flickering in his chest. "You mean you'd help him?" "Yes," the man replied. "If he's as gifted as the video shows, we could sponsor his education. Proper piano lessons, instruments, everything he needs." The pianist's heart lifted, then sank again. "I'd love that for him, but I don't know where he lives." He never said much about his family, just that he lives with his grandmother. The man nodded slowly. "If the boy shows up again, tell him we're looking for him. I'll leave you my card." He handed over a simple white business card with a gold logo in the corner. The pianist took it carefully, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and worry. After the man left, the pianist sat back down and stared at the piano keys. The idea that the boy could finally have a chance, a real chance, filled him with excitement, but also a quiet fear. What if he never came back? The day went by slowly. He played song after song, watching the street for that familiar figure. But the boy didn't come. By evening, as the sun began to fade behind the buildings, the pianist finally packed up. He sighed, looking at the empty spot beside the piano where the boy usually stood. Felt too quiet without him. The next day came and then another. Still no sign. Each morning, the pianist arrived early, hoping to see the boy running through the crowd, but the days passed in silence. The video kept spreading online. Sometimes, people even came to the square, hoping to see the street duo perform again. But only the pianist was there. One afternoon, As he was finishing a song, a small voice behind him said, "You waited for me." The pianist turned so fast that his stool nearly fell over. There he was, the boy, standing by the fountain holding his backpack. He looked a little tired, but his smile was the same. "You're late," the pianist said, half laughing, half relieved. The boy shrugged. "Grandma wasn't feeling well. I had to stay home for a few days." The pianist's face softened. "How is she now?" "She's better," the boy said quietly. "She told me to come back. She said you'd be waiting." The pianist smiled warmly. "She's a wise woman." The boy looked at him curiously. "Why are there so many people today?" The pianist chuckled. "Because of you. Someone recorded our song. It's all over the internet." The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" the pianist said. "And there's someone who wants to meet you. A man who runs a music foundation. He saw the video and wants to help you learn properly." The boy froze, staring at him. "Help me?" "Yes," the pianist said. "He wants to give you lessons, instruments, maybe even a scholarship." For a moment the boy didn't move. His expression was a mix of joy and disbelief. "But why me?" he whispered. "Because," the pianist said softly, "when you play, people listen. Not everyone can do that." The boy's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them away quickly. "Grandma always said music could change things. Maybe she was right." "She was," the pianist said. "Come on. Let's play something for her." They sat together again, the same way they always had, side by side, fingers brushing the keys. But this time the crowd was larger. Cameras were already waiting. People recognized them, cheering softly as they began. The boy started with the same melody he had played before, but it sounded different now. Stronger, fuller, like hope was hidden inside every note. The pianist joined in, his deep chords wrapping around the boy's bright tune, blending into something that felt alive. The sound carried across the square, up the tall buildings, and into the hearts of everyone listening. Some people cried openly. Others stood perfectly still, afraid to breathe and break the moment. When they finished, the boy turned to the pianist and smiled through his tears. "Do you think Grandma heard it?" he asked quietly. The pianist nodded. "I think everyone heard it." The man from the foundation had been standing at the edge of the crowd the whole time. He stepped forward, clapping softly. The boy turned, a little nervous, as the man approached. "That was even better in person," the man said kindly. "You have something rare. A gift that can touch people." The boy looked down shyly. "Thank you, sir." The man crouched to meet his eyes. "Would you like to learn more? To play on bigger stages with real teachers?" The boy hesitated, then glanced at the pianist. The man smiled reassuringly. "It's your choice," he said. The boy thought for a long moment. "Only if I can still come back here sometimes," he said. "I don't want to stop playing here." The man chuckled. "I think that can be arranged." The pianist laughed softly. "You've got a good heart, kid." The boy grinned. "Grandma says never forget where you started." Everyone around them applauded again. The man exchanged a few words with the pianist, then handed the boy an envelope, an invitation to audition for the foundation. The boy held it tightly, as if afraid it might disappear. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft gold, the pianist and the boy sat together for one last song that evening. Neither said much, they didn't need to. The music spoke for them, full of warmth, gratitude, and a little sadness too. When the final note faded, the pianist turned to the boy and said quietly, "Wherever you go next, remember, play like you're talking to the sky." The boy smiled, repeating the words softly. Talking to the sky. That night, as the city lights flickered on, the square fell silent again. But the echo of their music lingered in the streets, in the people who had listened, and in the heart of the boy who was about to begin a new chapter.